So I'm still getting to know the Lattice, and one of the things that I wanted to know is, can you thermal it? Obviously this is a 13.75 meter projected wing. It's tiny, and gives you a normal sink rate of between 1.5 and 2 meters per second, but obviously when you turn and you angle the wing, your sink rate goes up. So my usual style of flying is to really crank it into the thermals and try and get it banked right up to turn tightly. But I found with this wing, if you do that, your sink rate just goes up to the point where you can't climb. So the secret is to try and do bigger, wider, flat turns, which is not something I'm that experienced at. But here's me trying anyway. I flew from Mystic. I was going to land over on my property, and then I hit a thermal over Wandy, and I'm not doing a very good job of centering in it. There was a reasonable 12 to 15k an hour or something like that drift with the thermals on this day, and they were a bit broken. We had a thunderstorm already earlier in the day, and there was another one an hour later, so it's pretty unstable. I would guess the thermals must have been at least 3 meters per second, and so when I'm into thermal I'm getting a 1 meter per second climb rate, which the maths would be about right. If you look at the speeds as I'm turning, you'll see that the wing is trimming at about 32 kilometers an hour. Now that's with me all up flying weight, including the wing and all my gear and everything, of around 75 kilos. I'm flying it with a little bit of brake on. If you let it go, you get another couple of k's an hour. But this is just my normal active flying technique. I think with single surface wings, you can pretty much just leave it alone and let it do its own thing. They move around an awful lot up there, but they're basically taking care of everything themselves. So it's a bit unusual that it moves so much, but you get used to it very quickly, and it's got very little energy. So even though it is quite a dynamic wing with a high wing loading, and it does throw you about a bit when you are in turbulent air or when you're playing with it, it really just sorts itself out very quickly. It doesn't feel like it needs a huge amount of management. But anyway, so here's a thermal. I get about 150 meter height gain out of this before I'm starting to wonder whether or not the wind strength means that I might not make it back to my landing area. So I pull out of the thermal. But this is the third time I've climbed in this wing, and I'm getting better at climbing it. You just really can't crank it over on a wingtip like I normally would. You've got to do big flat turns, but you can definitely thermal it. So that's very, very cool. Obviously you can thermal any wing, but I mean you can actually fly it doing this. Performance wise, you'll see when I leave the thermal in a minute and I head back into wind, I'm going into a 12 to 15 kilometer an hour wind, and the GPS speeds pretty much show that I've got a hands up trim of around 32. There was a lot of lift and sink on this day, and some rough air as well, and you see the glide ratio suffers. I'm sure the glide ratio of this wing is going to be worse in rough air than a more solid wing or a two-liner or something which can cut through turbulence. That goes without saying. I don't actually think it's necessarily, orders of magnitude worse than a similar sized wing like the Viola, which I had as well. If you were coming back up the valley, the same thing I'm doing now, and you flying against the headwind and in turbulent air, I still had the feeling like I was falling out of the sky, and I'd be wondering whether I was going to make my intended landing field. I didn't feel it was that much more floaty. The main difference with the Viola, I guess, was just that when you went to brake, you have a very gradual increase of pressure and a very good round out, a lot of energy in the wing. Whereas with this, the pressure in the brakes increases to a very high point, and then at that very high point, which is just before a spin or a stall, that's where you've got your optimized perfect round out. And it took me a while flying this to get the hang of that point, but now that I know where it is, I've got no problems landing in any conditions, whether it's tail or rough air or whatever. I understand the wing, but initially I was either not rounding out. I mean, it really wasn't rounding out hard enough. When I felt that much brake pressure, I thought I must be right on the stall point, but actually you've got to go right to the edge of the stall point just to get the best out of the wing when you're landing it, if you want the maximum round out. But it's a very easy wing to handle, and even in here, I'm in quite turbulent conditions. The wind is coming from the northwest, so I'm sort of on the lee side of the hill a bit, but also there's a valley breeze that's coming from in front, so there's a bit of turbulent air, but also mixed with thermals. And you can see my sink rate here. You can see I'm coming down at 2 meters per second easy most of the time, so it is a little wing. That's what you would expect. I'm about in the middle of the weight range, I guess, for this wing, but it definitely isn't as floaty as a normal paraglider, but then it only weighs 1.5 kilos, so I wanted something that I could run with, that would fit into a little running backpack, but which I could still use thermals to extend my glide. So instead of just being a straight descent wing, it means that I can fly from places which require a bit of a climb out or a bit of better performance on days when it's thermic. So that's very cool. And so this is just me setting up to land. You can see basically you can see what's happening. There's it's thermic. I'm heading into the wind. There's probably a 10-12k wind northwest from the direction I'm heading in now, the air's a bit turbulent, but the wing behaves really well. It moves around a lot, which feels strange at first, but actually you come to trust it very quickly because there's there's nothing behind it, so it's not going to do anything radical. It's just sorting itself out. And this is like a perfect landing, so hard on the brakes. You can see it engage the rear lines there, and I find it's quite common for the wing to spin after you're on the ground if you don't immediately lift your hands up to take pressure off the brakes. But what does that matter once your feet are on the ground, and very easy to ground handle. So I love this little wing.